Senate Bill 210 required the California Department of Education to create benchmarks and protocols for deaf children under 5 to ensure they meet the same linguistic milestones as hearing children. The following videos will briefly discuss the language acquisition process, language milestones for toddlers and young children, and how first language acquisition is essential for second language learning. So, how do humans acquire language? Babies are born as a clean slate, they have no language. Yet, within a few years, young children become masters of their native language. So how does this happen? Well, there are a few different theories on how this happens. We will not discuss them all in this series. But we will look at one of the most important ones, the critical period hypothesis. This hypothesis describes the period in which language acquisition can occur more rapidly and efficiently than any other period in a person's life. It is unclear when this window begins and ends, but there is agreement that it closes before age 10. As the brain matures, the language acquisition process becomes arduous with the loss of brain plasticity. In other words, it becomes harder to acquire a language as people age. Another critical idea proposed by Noam Chomsky is the possible existence of a language acquisition device, or LAD. He presents a pre-programmed brain mechanism to develop grammar based on linguistic input. For example, a baby's brain exposed to English will adapt to the grammatical rules of the English language. A history of research supports both of these theories. Babies, infants, and young children are equipped and ready to receive language. Expose humans to language as early as possible for the best possible outcomes. Any language exposure or acquisition process delay will negatively impact the person's overall life. We can see the results of late language exposure in well-known cases such as Victor of Aveyron or Jeannie. Victor was a French child who was found around the age of 9 or 10. Based on his appearance, lack of speech, and food preferences, researchers assumed he spent most of his life in the wild. Educators initially brought Victor to the National Institute of the Deaf in Paris and was taught language by Roch-Ambroise Séquard. Later, Jean-Marc Idard took over and recorded Victor's language progress. Ultimately, Victor could understand the meanings of actions, but Itard struggled with teaching Victor how to speak. Idard never tried to teach Victor sign language since he preferred oralism and claimed, quote, Victor was the mental and psychological equivalent of someone born deaf and dumb. Jeannie was a victim of abuse. At approximately 20 months, her father immobilized her in a locked room. She was forbidden to interact with people or any kind of stimulation, and her father starved her. At 13, her abuse was discovered. Compared to Victor, Jeannie was discovered after the critical period hypothesis, and the work of Noam Chomsky were theorized. Therefore, some researchers saw Jeannie as a chance to study these theories. In the end, Jeannie typically spoke in short utterances and inconsistently used the grammar she knew. However, she was able to understand and produce longer utterances. Victor and Jeannie offer insight into language acquisition as they both support the critical period hypothesis and how detrimental language deprivation can be. Acquiring language is a difficult process that people need help understanding. It could be because it happens at such a young age, a time our memory does not stretch back to. However, when you break down the language acquisition process, you get to understand how laborious the process is. One of the most important parts of language acquisition is phonological awareness. Phonemes are the smallest meaningless parts of a language. One of the first things infants must do is teach themselves what sounds, or movements, are language and what is not. For example, if a person moved their arms, was that language, or were they completing an action? Babies learn how to separate language from natural sounds and movements. They will use eye gaze or mouth movements to help them identify phonemes. This is important because they need to be aware of the language's phonemes to decode morphemes, words, or signs and produce them. A common milestone of language acquisition is babbling. This happens when babies become aware of the different phonemes of their language and they decide to attempt to replicate the language. It is incoherent, and people respond to infants babbling by babbling back, agreeing, or using the target language naturally and spontaneously. Sometimes, when interacting with infants, people will modify their language production. This process is called motherese and can be easily identified by people speaking in a high-pitched voice, repeating the same phrases, and making explicit callouts to surroundings or actions. Language acquisition happens naturally and spontaneously. But for it to happen, the person must be exposed to language. Victor Genie and other cases show how detrimental withholding language can be. In the next video, we will shift to bilingualism. Language acquisition plays an important role in learning more languages because if you do not have a first language, how can a person learn a second?